Topic that we'll be discussing is about the Philippine taxation. Taxation is a reality that all citizens must contend with for the primary reason that government raise revenue from the people they govern to be able to function fully. In exchange for the taxes that people pay, the government promises to improve the citizens' lives through good governance. Now let us define what is taxation and taxes. Taxation is the imposition of compulsory levies on individuals or entities by governments in every country of the world. Taxation is usually used to collect income for government expenses, but it can also be used for other purposes. Taxes are forced contribution imposed by a government agency on individuals or corporations, whether municipal, regional, or national. There are two types of taxes, the national and local. National taxes are those levied and collected through the Bureau of Internal Revenue, whereas local taxes are those levied and collected by the local government. There are 12 types of national taxes. First is the capital gain taxes. Capital gain tax is a levy on the profit that an investor makes from the sale of an investment such as stock shares. Second is the documentary stamp tax. It is a tax levied on the completion of transaction documents. Third is the donor's tax. It is a tax on the transmission of gifts without consideration. Gifts might come from your parents, friends, family, or even your boss. Fourth is the estate tax. It is defined as the tax imposed upon the privilege of individuals to transfer properties occasioned by death. Fifth is the income tax, wherein government levy taxes on enterprises and persons operating within their jurisdiction. Sixth is the percentage tax. It is a business tax regulated in the Philippines that is imposed on individuals or businesses that sell or lease goods and services with annual sales not exceed to the amount required to register as VAT registered taxpayers. Seventh is the value-added tax. It is a consumption tax on products and services that is levied at each level of the supply chain where value is added from manufacture to sale. Eighth is the excise tax. It is imposed on the sale of specific goods or services or on certain uses. Ninth is the withholding tax on compensation. It is an estimate of the income tax burden on compensation that the employer is obligated to withhold from each payment, accrual, or recording of salaries and wages in its books of accounts. Tenth is the expanded withholding tax. It is a tax prescribed on income payments and is creditable against the payer's income tax due. Tenth is the final withholding tax. It is a type of withholding tax that is imposed on specific types of income payments and is not deducted from the payee's income tax liability and other income subject to ordinary tax rates for the taxable year. Last is the withholding tax on government money payments. It is the withholding tax withheld by government offices and instrumentalities including government-owned or controlled enterprises and local government entities. It is the tax that must be paid before any payment to private people, businesses, and partnerships.
Hi, my name is Maria Laika P. Salinas and my report is all about the second types of taxes which is local. So first, let's define what is the local taxes. So local taxes is based on the local government taxation in the Philippines as stated in Republic Act 7610 or the Local Government Code of 1991 and ang mga local taxes ay buwis na kita na ipinapataw ng mga lokal na pamahalaan. So dito, may 14 na kinabibilangan ang mga local taxes. So first, tax on transfer of real property ownership. So ito yung pinapataw sa pagbebenta, donasyon, barter o anumang pangparaan ng paglipat ng pagmamayari o real property. So 2. Tax on business of printing publications. So ito yung ipinapataw sa mga negosyo sa pag-imprenta at paglathala natathala tulad ng libro, card, poster, leaflet, handbill, certificates, receipts, pamphlets, at iba pa. So, 3. Franchise tax. So, ito naman is sinisingil sa ilang mga negosyo na nagnenegosyo na nakasama sa isang partikular na estado. 4. Tax on sand, gravel, and other quarry resources. So, ito is pinapataw sa mga ordinaryong bato, buhangin, graba, at iba pang mapagkukuhanan ng quarry gaya ng tinutukoy sa ilalim ng National Internal Revenue Code. So, ito din ay tumutukoy sa mga materyales sa itaas na kinukuha mula sa mga pampublikong lupain o mula sa mga dagat, lawa, ilog, sapa, at iba pang pampublikong tubig sa loob ng teritorial na jurisdiction. So, 5. Professional tax. So, ito naman yung isang buwis sa bawat taong nakikibahagi sa pagsasanay sa kanyang propesyon na nangangailangan ng pagsusuri ng gobyerno tulad ng mga pagsusuri sa lisensya. 6. Amusement tax. So, ito yung isang buwis na kinokolekta mula sa mga nagmamay-ari o nangungupahan o ng mga operator ng mga theater, sinihan, cinemas, concert halls, circuses, boxing stadya, at iba pang mga lugar ng libangan. So, 7. Annual fixed tax. For every delivery truck or van of manufacturers or producers, wholesalers of dealers, or retailers in certain products. So, ito naman is taon ng nakapirmang buwis sa bawat truck, van, o anumang sasakyan na ginagamit ng mga manufacturer, producer, wholesaler, dealer, or retailer sa paghahatid o pamamahagi ng distilled spirits, fermented liquor, soft drinks, cigars, at sigarilyo, at iba pang produkto ng mga sales outlet o mga mamimili direct naman o hindi sa loob ng lalawigan. So, 8. Tax on business. So, ito naman is ipinapataw ng mga lungsod o munisipalidad sa mga negosyo bago sila mabigyan ng lisensya sa negosyo o permit para magsimula ng mga operasyong batay sa schedule ng mga rate na itinakda ng kodigo ng lokal na pamahalaan. 9. Fees of sealing and licensing of weights and measures. So, ito is pinapataw para sa sealing at paglilisensya ng mga timbang at sukat. Ito rin yung upang magpataw ng mga regulasyon kaugnay ng timbang at sukat sa itinakdang konseho ng lungsod, probinsya o munisipyo. 10. Fishery rentals, fees and charges. So, ito yung pinapataw ng munisipyo, lungsod, mga napagkalooban ng mga pribihelyo ng pangisdaan sa katubigan ng munisipyo, lungsod, lalo na sa pribihelyong magtayo ng mga fish coral, talaba, tahong, o iba pang aquatic bed o bangus fry areas at iba pa ayon sa nakasaad sa local government code. So, community task. So, ito yung buwis sa komunidad na ipinapataw din sa bawat korporasyon gaano man nilikha ng organisado, domestic man, o residenteng dayuhan na nakikibahagi o nagnenegosyo sa Pilipinas. 12. Taxes levied by the barangays on stores or retailers with fixed business establishments. So, ito yung kabuuang benta o resibo ng naunang taon ng kalendaryo na nakakahalaga ng 50,000 piso o mas mababa para sa barangay sa lungsod at 30,000 piso o mas mababa para sa mga municipal na barangay sa hanggang hindi lampas sa 1% sa naturang kabuuang benta o mga resibo. So, 13. Service fees or charges. So, kinokolekta ng mga barangay para sa mga paggamit ng ari-arian ng posibilidad na serbisyo ng pagmamayari ng barangay tulad ng palay, kopra, o mga dryer ng tabako. So, last, 14. Barangay clearance. Ito naman yung bayad na kinokolekta ng mga barangay sa paglabas ng barangay clearance, isang dokumentong kinakailangan para sa maraming pamahalaan, mga transaksyon, tulad ng kapag kumukuha ng business permit mula sa isang lungsod ng municipal na pamahalaan o nagka-apply ng trabaho sa isang opisina ng gobyerno o isang pribadong kumpanya.
I am Armida Vargas and I am the third reporter and I will going to report about the taxation in Spanish Philippines. So, Philippines may have abundant natural resources even before the encroachment Spaniards, but our ancestors were mainly involved in a subsistence economy. So these are, the first is, the Spaniards introduced the payment of tributes to generate resources to finance the maintenance of the island. So, ito yung kanina. So, the purpose is to generate resources to finance the maintenance of the island. Nabanggit ko kanina to. So, such as salaries of government officials and expenses of the clergy. The difficulty faced by the Spaniards in revenue collection through the tribute was the dispersed nature of the settlements, which they solved by introducing the system of reduction by creating pueblos where Filipinos were gathered awarded plots of land to till. Later on, the settlements payments will be handled by encomenderos who receive rewards from the Spanish crown for their services. Exempted from payment of tributos were the principales, alcaldes, gobernadores, cabezas de barangay, soldiers, and members of the civil guard, government officials, and vagrants. So the Filipino who were once satisfied with agricultural production for subsistence had to increase production to meet the demands of payments, and a more intensive agricultural system had to be introduced. So later on, half the tribute was paid in cash and the rest with produce. This financed the conquest of the Philippines. So the next is, at first, half of the tribute was paid in cash and the other half in produce. Yun yung kasasabi ko lang. This financed the conquest of the Philippines to Manila, Acapulo. Trade was established through the galleons, a way by which the Spaniards could make sure European presence and would be sustained. So once a year, the galleon would be loaded up with the merchandise from Asia and sent to New Spain or the Mexico and back. This improved the economy of Philippines and reinforced the control of the Spaniards all over the country. The tax collection was still very poor and subsidy from the Spain would be needed through the Real delivered the Mexican treasury to the Philippines through the galleons. The subsidy stopped as Mexico became independent in 1820. Next is, in 1884, the payment of the tribute was put to a stop and was replaced by a pool. The Chinese in the Philippines were also made to pay their discriminatory cedula. There were no excise taxes collected by the Spaniards throughout the years of colonialism. In 1884, about the cedula is payment of the cedula is progressive and according to income categories. This system, however, was a heavy burden for the peasants and was easy for the wealthy. But because of this revenue collection greatly increased and became a main source of government income. The Chinese in the Philippines were also made to pay their discriminatory cedula, which was bigger than what the Filipinos paid. And the next is, forced labor was a character of Spanish colonial taxation in the Philippines. It was used to augment labor required by wood cutting and shipbuilding. Colonial government also gained income from monopolies such as the manufacture and sale liquor, cockpits, and opium. It proved useful in defending the territory of colony, augmenting. So, yun yung sinasabi ko kanina. So, through the polo system, male Filipinos were obliged to serve, a burden that resulted in increase in death rate and flight to the mountains, which led to a decrease in population in the 17th century. This changed later on as polos and servicios became later. It was organized at the municipal level. Labor provided was used in public works such as the building of roads and bridges. Some were made to serve the municipal office or as night guards. And lastly, taxation in the Philippines during the Spanish colonial period was characterized by the heavy burden placed on the Filipino and the corruption of the local elite. So, male required to provide labor for 40 days a year, reduced to 15 days a year in 1884. They may opt by paying the falas of 3 pesos per annum, which was usually lost to corruption because it was collected at the municipal level and were known as kairas or droppings. The polos would be called prestation personal or personal services by the second half of the 19th century. So, taxation in the Philippines during the Spanish colonial period was characterized by the heavy burden placed in the Filipinos. Then, the principales who were given positions such as cabezas de barangay or alcaldes in the local government were able to enrich themselves by pocketing tributos and or falas, while the peasants were left to be abused. I will add some information lang. So, the tribute was form of taxation implemented by the Spanish government in the Philippines in order to support government and church operations. It was introduced in 1570. In 1589, the value of the tribute was raised to accommodate the needs of the church. This was called sanctorum. On other forms of taxes from the Spanish era is the tributo, which was originally between 8 to 10 reals. Forced labor or polo y servicio was also a network for tax payment. Eventually, with the cedula, Spain replaced tributo with cedula, which allowed them to keep track of the people who could pay taxes.
Bago po ako magsimula, magpapakilala muna po ako. I am Manalyn Enviado and my report is all about taxation under the Americans. The Americans who acquired the Philippines aim to make the economy self-sufficient by running the government with the smallest possible sum of revenues and create surplus in the budget. From 1898 to 1933, sinusunod ng mga Amerikano ang mga sistema ng pagbubuwis ng mga Espanyol na may ilang mga pagbabago na nagsasaad na ang sistemang ipinakilala ng mga Espanyol ay luma na at regressive. The Internal Revenue Law of 1904 was passed as a reaction to the problems of collecting land. It prescribed 10 major sources of revenue. Number 1 is licensed tax and firms dealing in alcoholic beverage and tobacco. Number 2 is excise taxes on alcohol, beverage, and tobacco products. Number 3 is taxes on banks and bankers. A bank tax or a bank levy is a tax on banks which was discussed in the context of the financial crisis. Number 4 is document stamp taxes. Is a tax on documents, instruments, law and agreements, and papers evidencing the acceptance, assignments, sale or transfer of an obligation, right or property incident thereto. Number 5 is cedula. The cedula went through changes in the new law as the rate was fixed for adult male, which result in a great decline in revenue. Cedula ay ipinataw ng mga Amerikano noong Enero 1, 1940 na magkabisa ang mga batas Commonwealth bilang 465 na nag-utos na pagpapataw ng batayang buwis sa paninira na 50 sentimos at karagdagang buwis sa 1 piso batay sa mga salik na gaya ng kita at real estate ng mga hawak. Number 6, taxes on insurance in insurance companies. Number 7, taxes on forest products. Tax implications, incentives associated with forest land ownership, especially related to forestation, expenses, and timber harvest income, are described in the U.S. Forest Service Southern Regions annual publication, Tax Tips for Forest Land Owners. Number 8, mining concession. Mga lugar na nilalaan ng mga pamahalan sa mga kumpanya para sa pagkuha ng mga mineral, pagmimina. Ang concession ay isang lisensya, permit o iba pang kontrata na nagbibigay sa mga pribadong kumpanya ng mga karapatan na kumuha ng mga mineral mula sa mga pampublikong lupain. Number 9, taxes on businesses and manufacturing. And last is 10, occupational licenses. Is form of government regulation requiring a licenses to pursue a particular profession or vocation for compensation.
Good day everyone, I'm Michelle Villamil and I will be the one who will discuss the taxation during Commonwealth period. Income tax rates were increased in 1936, adding a surtax rate on individual net incomes in excess of 10,000 pesos. Income tax rates of corporation were also increased. Ano nga ba ang surtax? Ito ay tumutukoy sa karagdagang buwis sa mga bagay na nabuwisan na. Noong 1939, binalangkas ng pamahalaang Commonwealth ang National Internal Revenue Code na nagpapakilala ng malalaking pagbabago sa bagong sistema ng buwis, gaya ng mga sumusunod. Una, ang normal na buwis na 3% at ang surtax na kita ay pinalitan ng isang buwis sa progresibong rate. Pangalawa, binawasan ng mga personal na exemption. Pangatlo, bahagyang nadagdagan ng buwis na kita ng korporasyon sa pamamagitan ng pagpapasok ng mga buwis sa mga minanang ari-arian o mga regalong na ibigay sa pangalan ng mga namatay na tao. Pang-apat, ang pinagsama-samang buwis sa pagbebenta ay pinalitan ng single turnover tax na 10% sa mga luho. Pang-lima, ang mga buwis sa alak, sigarilyo, mga produktong panggugubat at pagmimina ay itinaas. Pang-anim, ang mga dividendo ay ginawang buwisan. Ang ipinakilalang istruktura ng buwis ay isang pagpapabuti ng naunang sistemang ipinakilala ng mga Amerikano, ngunit nanatiling hindi pantay. Habang sumiklab ang digmaan, ang pangongolekta ng buwis ay isang mahirap na gawain at ang mga karagdagang kita ng gobyerno ay nakuha mula sa mga benta ng national sweepstakes at pagbebenta ng mga buno ng gobyerno.
Good day everyone, I'm going to explain the fiscal policy from 1946 to present. Manuel Rojas was the Philippines' first president following World War II when the country was suffering from low productivity, declining job availability, and rising unemployment rates. The country was also suffering from American government with involvement in the government sector. During the administration of President Philippine Quirino, the momentum of economic growth came from the establishment of import and exchange controls, which led to the rise of import substitution. During the time of President Magsaysay, Garcia, and Macapagal, they promised to study the country's tax structure and policy through the creation of a tax commission in 1959 by means of Republic Act No. 2211. Corruption also increased throughout the post-war Republic period. During the presidency of Ferdinand Marcos, the tax system was still primarily reliant on indirect taxes, which accounted for 70% of total tax collection. The tax system remained unresponsive, and taxes grew at an average annual rate of 15% and generate a low tax yield. During the administration of Corazon Aquino, the 1986 Tax Reform Program was used to reform the tax systems. The 1986 Tax Reform Program, its aim was to simplify the tax system, make revenues more responsive to economic activity, promote horizontal equity, and promote growth by collecting existing taxes. Along with tax reform came administrative changes such as the restructuring of the Department of Finance and the Bureau of Internal Revenue or the BIR through Executive Order 127, increased collection and tax audits, computerization, and reduced corruption. Both tax and revenue effort rose, increasing from 10.7% in 1985 to 15.4% in 1992. Next in line is President Fidel V. Ramos. In 1997, this administration launched its own tax reform initiative, the Comprehensive Tax Reform Program. During the administration of President Joseph Estrada, his term was too short to make any significant changes to the tax systems. Next is President Gloria Arroyo. She decided to raise government expenditure without adjusting tax revenue. From 2002 to 2004, this resulted in massive shortfalls. The administration of President Benigno Aquino III attempted to reform the excise tax on cigarettes and alcohol, commonly known as the sin tax reform. Our current President Rodrigo Duterte promised a tax reform, especially in the area of income taxes, with the promise of lowering income tax rates for working Filipinos. The proposed tax reform seeks to limit value-added tax exemptions and increase excise taxes on petroleum products and automobiles. The country's current income tax system is the second highest in Southeast Asia, and the country's existing income tax rules are outdated, having been created 2 decades ago.